the standard one of kind of how did you get into art? How did you get to where you are today? What brought you into the art world?
I suppose to a certain degree I was born with it. I turned my parents' pots and pans into a drum kit when I was 5 years old, I think, and these wooden spatulas sort of became the drumsticks, and rhythm, even up until now, is probably one of the cores of how to come about with creativity or timing and pace and all those kinds of things. But music was my very first love. And when I was a teenager, I had some bands and played the guitar and went about it sort of that way. But I didn't dare to dream that could maybe be what I was going to do with my life. And my parents were very much more towards go to business school and make a viable living and don't become a punk type type deal. So it was quite a struggle. And there was this funny episode when actually, in hindsight, it's a very privileged position for your parents to try and force you to become someone who's going to be financially independent very early and those kind of things. But I just knew that money wasn't my first priority. And I was already into Photoshop. I was already into movies. I was thinking about maybe I could have a career in advertising. There was a bunch of things that I was circling around when I was about 18 years old and got out of high school. And my mom even tried to get me to go into business school by buying this course that I needed to go on. And I had this Chinese toga on. I had a couple of beers before going into the first day. And when I went to sit at the back. And there was a professor at the front, and he asked me, well, not me personally, but everyone. So who here has read all of these 3 books more than 3 times? And I didn't have a clue of what those books even were. So I felt like a fish out of water. And then I just sort of excused myself after a while to go to the toilet, but I took my bag with me. And luckily, apparently, my mom got her money back to about the business course, because I literally was there for about an hour before I left and went to another bar, I guess. Yeah, that was early days. But movies became the thing. I started making independent films when I was about 19 and fought through that whole thing, went to apprentice in film production companies and then eventually got into film school. And long story, then got frustrated with it all and became a contemporary artist by inventing a method of my own, starting to body paint on people and then photographing and putting it together with Photoshop and digitally. And so for, relevance to crypto art, I suppose, is that for 12 years I've been making high resolution digital originals, of which there are now about 350 ready to be tokenized. But ironically, even the majority of my contemporaries still think that I'm a traditional painter, because in a sense, I think I just did too good of a job for people to think that what it is that I'm doing is normal paintings, because I utilize paint, but in fact, it's all digital and as the sort of result. But then I do make them into physical copies and
So
variety of
let's
ways.
step back just a little bit. So you did independent filmmaking. If I'm right, you made a documentary based on the financial system and Bitcoin. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
I got
Is that correct?
I got red pilled around 2006 of how money works, and obviously it was one of those really big moments, because I saw the very first zeitgeist film, and you can think of what of the other conspiratorial elements of that film, whatever you like, but it sort of showed how money comes into existence, and that's something that has held water ever since then, even by major economists and people who I trusted and who were experts, even, that I started questioning that, because at that point I was already an entrepreneur and I had some friends who were working in the finance industry and things like that. So I knew who to ask the questions of. And when they either couldn't answer, they sort of went blank, or then they sort of admitted that, this is part of how this whole thing works. And it was a peculiar moment in time, because I'd taken a business loan. I'd become an entrepreneur. I have my own production company at that point. And then sort of on the one hand, I became a money activist. And then on the other hand, an entrepreneur, and what that results in is a human being that has their foot on the brake and the gas simultaneously, because it's almost like an impossible equation. So this is why ultimately crypto and crypto art has become such an important and powerful force in my life, is that I'm able to be in alignment as a human being, as someone who wants to do good in the world, someone who wants to monetize and do well in entrepreneurship, but as well as do helpful and good things to people, so we get more freedom and sort of happiness in our lives. And for even normal people right now, when they're looking at the finance system, most people are starting to wake up that there's something pretty fishy going on in here.
So you've been in crypto and kind of, I'd say blockchain, because crypto is kind of a very is what crypto art's kind of coined. But you've been in blockchain sector longer than most artists. So how did that kind of come to be? Because I think you're one of the first artists, as far as I know, to kind of take advantage of the circuit and kind of going to the crypto spaces. I mean, there's Kevin Abosch as well, but you're definitely one of the first that I've seen that was kind of around. How did that come about?
Well, one of the reasons why it's been kind of easy to get to know a lot of the OGs of the space is that because I was sort of a part of this whole money war trenches ever since 2006, I've been around for longer than many of the OGs have. So in one sense, that was a natural thing. But a little bit of a long story short, there was a guy called Risto here in Finland who was one of the whales of Bitcoin and got in very, very early and bought large amounts, and even bought a castle eventually in Estonia with his Bitcoin. And he was quite the character in many ways, and revelatory Christian, and he was also being accused of a bunch of very unsavory things here in the press at the time. And I really, even though Bitcoin probably otherwise would have been a very interesting thing, because of this guy, I was kind of put off by being a part of it at that time, to my own detriment, unfortunately. But in a summer or spring or summer of 2017, I went for a coffee with a friend of mine in London, living there, and he came out of the crypto investor closet, if you will, and said that, hey, listen, this is what I do, and I just paid myself for a full year yesterday, and I've been trying to look for a decent crypto art piece on my wall for 4 days online, and I couldn't find anything that is even halfway decent. So I have him to thank for that whole thing, because he said that, he knew about my history and my values and things like that, what I've been involved in, and he said, hey, listen, you really need to look into this now, that I think there is something important here. And it was more or less something like 8 days from that conversation that I had artforcrypto.com, as well as the first art piece on there called Pushback, which was about the market. And it's become such a open highway. So many things were very frustrating.